But when we saw Ronell Johnson against Blue Spring South, and I know it was in the playoffs, and it was that kind of all or nothing mentality. I mean, you win or go home. So obviously he's going to kind of leave more out on the field. But this is a guy that has every offer under the sun. This is a guy that, and again, playing a position where we've seen guys in the past that are heavily recruited out of the Kansas City area that play defensive line that might only turn it on third down, or might only turn it on in a play where it needs to be made. Ronell Johnson, the motor and the work ethic do not stop.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here, as always, with Ryan Wallace. And we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. A few weeks ago, we released our top 10 rankings for the state of Kansas in the class of 2026, and tonight, thought we'd go ahead and do the same for the Missouri side of the Kansas City Metro. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us to grow the show and put us in front of more people like you. Before we get into the rankings, Ryan, it's been a busy week on the coaching circuit, both at the local college and high school levels. Let's start with K-State, where Connor Riley, Kansas State's offensive coordinator, one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. He's moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. The Wildcats had some pretty good candidates already in-house in co-OC Matt Wells, who, of course, is formerly the head coach at Utah State and Texas Tech. And with Wells sliding over to take over those coordinator duties from the co-OC role, today it was announced, reported, however you want to put it, that Kansas State is moving tight ends coach Ryan LePack to Riley's old offensive line job. So, Ryan, what were your thoughts on those changes?
Well, I guess first off with Coach Riley going down to be with, the reuniting with Cooper Beebe at the Dallas Cowboys. I think the timing worked out great for that. I think Riles has paid his dues. As you mentioned, I think one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, was ready for that jump. And yet, at the same time, obviously there was that buzz with him as a play caller this last year around Manhattan. And that was kind of always the roll of the dice that K-State was going to take, is either this is going to work out great and Connor Riley's going to be a terrific offensive coordinator and remain your offensive line coach for years to come, or maybe this doesn't work out and you have to know that, the likelihood of him, staying on, let's say he stays on as a play caller, maybe he does improve, but there was always that chance that the play calling thing didn't work out. And I don't think realistically there was ever going to be the place that Connor Riley would stay at K-State and take the demotion back to offensive line coach, right? So I think that timing wise, this works out for everybody. I think Riles gets to go off to the NFL and test himself in that juncture. Everybody's happy because I think of the way that Kansas State ended this season. I think you could start to see some things with Connor Riley where if he had stayed, I think it would have been fine, but there still would have been those fans that would question it. Now you don't have to question it. And if he doesn't work out with the Cowboys, Kevin, he can come back with open arms to K-State or wherever, because he's still widely regarded as a terrific recruiter, terrific developer on the offensive line. And then when you go over to Brian LePack, I'm going to skip Coach Matt Wells because I think everybody saw that one coming. It was the minute Riley left, it was well, the keys are going to get handed to Matt Wells. And I'm really excited to see kind of what he can do with this offense, because the pieces mimic so much what he had at Utah State when he was the play caller there before he took the head job at Texas Tech. But with Brian LePack, I think keeping Drew Little as well, you get two really quality young coaches that have a great motor, but I think that are really skilled. I think both of them are really good teachers that maybe the folks outside of Manhattan really don't know about yet. But the IQ level of a Brian LePack, obviously he's got his law degree. He does singing and stuff, opera stuff. He's a brilliant mind, but you have to remember when K-State brought him on as an analyst, they pulled him from, he had just gotten play caller duties at Southern University. And with like no like on-field coaching experience to speak of. That's how like much he impressed, I think, folks in the coaching world and specifically at Southern. So when K-State got him, I mean, his trajectory has been super fast. He's sat in the booth with Colin Klein. He's been right there with Connor Riley and the folks throughout the last 2 years. So, I mean, I just think you knew that this was the right move. He's a former offensive lineman. So long-winded answer here, Kevin. This is a name that folks outside of Manhattan probably don't know yet. And I think this is a move that hopefully will keep him in Manhattan for the foreseeable future, because K-State, Chris Kleiman, everybody up there just cannot speak more highly of what Brian LePack is and what Brian LePack can be.
Good point. I think a lot of people do those lists now where you look at assistants who maybe aren't, the obvious assistant names and say, hey, watch out for this guy. He's an up and coming guy. Don't be surprised if you see Brian LePack dotting some of those lists over the next few years. Moving on to the high school level, Ryan, I'm not sure Spring Hill could have done a better job with its hire, luring Hall of Fame coach Fred Bouchard, who won 4 state titles at Harrisonville, another one at Staley for the Broncos' open head coaching spot. This wound up being a really highly coveted job, actually. Bouchard surprised a lot of people by leaving Mary Institute and St. Louis Country Day School, where they've won 11 games this year, reached the 5A semifinals before losing to Platte County, who eventually won that state title. Spring Hill hired a proven winner in this area.
This is big news for folks that maybe have either forgotten about Coach Bouchard or just aren't as plugged in. I think it's easy to just kind of gloss this over as, a new hire and what you and I kind of live near that area, but I think a lot of people would consider, rural Spring Hill, right? But as you mentioned, this was a very coveted job in the Metro. Yeah. I had several coaches reach out kind of like, why do you think this is such a good job? I look at, again, kind of being in this area and you think about where things are developing, where people are moving, right? Spring Hill and DeSoto, to me, Kevin, are like, we're 5-10 years away from those being major jobs. And in the case of Spring Hill, Coach Feedback left that in such great hands. Yeah. I mean, they had already over the last 2 years really began challenging Lewisburg as kind of the strong suitors of the Frontier League. And so now you bring in a guy like Coach Bouchard, great facilities out there. Again, I think a program that now is used to winning, and you add him. And again, folks, Kevin, you can speak to it probably even better than me, because I was still, I think, at K-State at this time, working at Go Power Cat. Wasn't boots on the ground in the Metro as much. But I mean, people forget this was a Staley team when he was in charge there that was like getting games on ESPN. I mean, yes. They had Julian Ross winning Simone Awards. Staley was, I mean, outside of Rockhurst, they were the thing when Coach Bouchard was there. So you have to think that Spring Hill is going to be in the thick of things, not only in the Frontier League, but, moving forward in 5A for the foreseeable future, as long as he's there.
Your point about him being a winner, the guy was at MICDS for 5 years, won 5 district championships, led the school to a runner-up finish in 2020. Like we said, the semifinals this past year. He takes over a Spring Hill program that went 8-2 this year, winning the Frontier League. Another Hall of Fame coach makes his return to the area, with Greg Jones joining Gene Weir's staff at Blue Valley North. For those who maybe don't know, Jones is a terrific coach all around the Kansas City area for, I think, around 25 years. You had him at Park Hill South, Odessa, and then he really started churning out perennial winners at Kearney, where he won 2 state titles, and going to Liberty North and winning at a high level there. Most recently, Ryan, he'd actually been in the college game, first as an analyst at Oregon, and then a defensive coordinator at Central Missouri. Heck of a get for the Mustangs.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Lanning thought him good enough to bring up to Eugene. So, I mean, that says a lot there, right there in itself of what Coach Jones can do. But yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, what Kearney is now, what Liberty North is now, much of that should be credited. At least some of it should be credited to Coach Jones. The folks on the Missouri side speak so highly of this guy. He has such a personality about him. He's tough, but at the same time, he's got this energy that I think will just infiltrate Blue Valley North, that is, right away. Obviously, you talk about kind of his coaching acumen and all the accolades and kind of just what he has on a resume, right? But the other thing that I think is going to be massive at Blue Valley North is what he's going to provide to their strength and conditioning program, getting him involved in that weight room. We saw Blue Valley North. They kind of got the bracket, in their favor in 5A, their first year down at 5A. But at the same time, they really impressed. You've still got to win those games. And they made a heck of a run after, a tough regular season in the EKL. They made a heck of a run in the 5A bracket. Now you've got Coach Jones. Obviously, you've got Coach Weir. Coach TJ O'Neill, I believe, is still there on the offensive side of the ball. All three of them are well-respected, well-known, either former head coaches or, in the case of Gene Weir, the head coach at Blue Valley North. Kevin, I think this is a Mustangs team. The more you put together these pieces in the coaching box or on the sideline, and you and I have started to kind of peruse the huddle a little bit. They've got some 26s and 27s coming down the pike now that the Mustangs might be starting to inch their way back up to the top tier of the EKL, and it could happen as soon as this fall.
Yeah, I agree. I think the young talent there in that program is something that's really going to be fun to watch develop under these guys who are all such proven coaches. Finally, our last kind of news and note, another top 10 player in the state going to make his decision this week. This is about the fastest I can remember, the top 10 sort of closing off, Ryan. We're shooting this episode Thursday night, just for posterity's sake. And in just under 24 hours, Shawnee Heights wide receiver Tyren Parker is going to announce his college commitment. We ranked Parker as the number 6 player in the state for 2026. Ryan, I know both of us are really bullish on Parker's upside moving forward.
Yeah, an interesting top 3. Let's not ignore that. The fact that K-State was not in there was a choice. I did not see that one coming. But at the same time, going back to Tyren, the player, heck of a wide receiver now. I mean, we've talked about it. I think he's legit upside, right? And having seen him against DeSoto this last year, yeah, there's some parts of his game that will need some polishing, right? That are a little raw, but all in all, I mean, it didn't take very long to see, again, the potential and the upside, which again isn't that far down the road for Tyren. I think senior year, you're going to see him take massive steps because, again, him working with Aiden Scott this last year was kind of their first year under the Friday night lights to really do it at the varsity level. Now they're more comfortable. He's in for a heck of a senior year. And again, I think wherever he lands, and I think you and I both have a pretty strong inclination of where he's going to land. It's going to be a big pickup and one that I think you can count on him to be maybe not an instant contributor, but a multi-year contributor and likely starter again for several years to come.
Yeah, for those watching, Ryan obviously a week ago announced that you were leaving Go Power Cap. Before you did log a crystal ball prediction.
I did.
So head
I'll leave that one in there.
I'll just say head on over to 24/7 Sports. We'll send him the traffic on that one to see where Ryan predicted him to go. When Parker commits, that'll make 7 of our top 10 prospects in the state of Kansas off the board. Who are our top 10 prospects on the Show Me side of the Kansas City Metro? You'll have to stay tuned. And speaking of rankings, it's tough not to rank our friends at Home Field Apparel number 1 for both the looks they have for your favorite school and the variety of gear, from quarter zips and knit sweaters to basketball jerseys, hoodies, joggers, and even outerwear. Home Field has you covered. Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri, all of them have more than 40 items to choose from. So head to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code linked below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Before this past high school season, we took aim at predicting the top 5 players on the Missouri side of the Kansas City Metro. At the time, here were our top 5. At number 1 was Ray-Pec running back Zephan Walker, followed by Blue Springs defensive lineman Ronell Johnson. Platte County quarterback and tight end duo Rocco Marriott and Jack Oots came in as numbers 3 and 4, and Lee Summit North two-way lineman Marcel Reed checked in at number 5. Ryan, it's safe to say there have been a few changes since then, and as we sit here in mid-February after each of these players had their junior seasons, just as we had in Kansas, there's a flip between numbers 1 and 2. With Johnson, who had one of the most dominant performances we saw this year, moving up a spot and swapping places with Walker. Numbers 3 and 4 stayed the same, with Marriott and Oots keeping their spots. Oots, of course, recently committed to Kansas. With one of the spring's hottest area recruits, Rockhurst tight end Kevin Sullivan, sneaking out into the top 5. Let's take it to 10, though, with a guy we love and we'll break down here in a bit, Blue Springs South quarterback / athlete Aiden Wilhelm at number 6, followed by Liberty North quarterback Trishan Daniil. Number 8 is St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright, with a pair of long outside athletes, Park Hill wide receiver Braylon Agee and Raytown cornerback Armand Weathers, finishing out our top 10. Ryan, let's go ahead and start at the top here.
Have to.
Mentioned how good Ronell Johnson was when we saw him. What did you see from the talented defensive lineman? Why that move up to number 1? Because we're still big fans of Walker. I know both of us feel like he's one of the best running back prospects we've seen in the Metro in a while. So it's less about, hey, Walker's not doing enough, and more about what we saw from Johnson.
I was going to say, if you're just going like talent on talent, I mean, again, different positions, right? But like you could. That's kind of a wash, so to speak, right? I mean, we think highly of Walker just like we think highly of Johnson. But when we saw Ronell Johnson against Blue Springs South, and I know it was in the playoffs, and it was that kind of all or nothing mentality. I mean, you win or go home. So obviously he's going to kind of leave more out on the field. But this is a guy that has every offer under the sun. This is a guy that, and again, playing a position where we've seen guys in the past that are heavily recruited out of the Kansas City area that play defensive line that might only turn it on third down, or might only turn it on in a play where it needs to be made. Ronell Johnson, the motor and the work ethic do not stop. And he's so versatile. You see in these highlights here, you can line him up hand on the ground, off the edge. He's going to win as a pass rush specialist. You're going to see him again, kind of off the edge. It doesn't matter whether his hand's on the ground or he's standing up. I mean, he's out of there in a hurry. So the get off is there for a guy for 245, 250 pounds. Here again, you're going to see him establish himself and win on the edge in run support. But then I think it's this play here. And again, you see him kind of slide more inside, the versatility that he brings with his body. But watch here. This is a play he doesn't have to make, but he does. Like that, to me, Kevin, is Ronell Johnson. He's a guy that's just going to give you that extra effort and already has the talent level in the body that, again, we talked about, can slide outside, can slide inside. He's a guy, to me, he's a defensive line or a defensive coordinator's dream. And again, Kansas City's been known for kind of pumping out these D linemen. I think he is the next one up. I just can't wait to see the kind of steps that he takes as a senior, because we were so wildly impressed with what he put out there as a junior.
To your point about his motor, this is a guy that's out there blocking kicks on special teams as well. And so the other thing, we like the term chess piece on this show. I feel like we've used it on a few different guys. Ronell Johnson's frame allows him to be sort of a versatile guy that maybe you could line up on the outside on passing downs, or on running downs, slide inside on passing downs. He can get after the quarterback at either one. I think there's a lot to like there. The versatility, the motor, the athleticism, the frame. There's a lot of reasons to like him at number 1 in the state. Or number 1, I should say, in the Metro.
Well, I mean, he might be number 1 in the state. You know, there's
some awfully good players on the St. Louis side this year. It does feel like it's pretty loaded over there. So I didn't want to speak out of turn on that one. But talking a little bit about Zephan really quick, a guy that as a running back just has all kinds of speed. And I think that's the thing that impresses you, is because usually when you see that type of speed, that's that type of big playability and the things that he brings, it comes in the hands of somebody who's 170 pounds, not somebody who has the frame and the body and everything that Zeffin has.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the muscle mass for him is there, and again, kind of you get the speed from it as well. I think the thing that I'm curious and interested to watch him kind of take that next step isn't so much in his game, but maybe in what he can provide the Rapec locker room, like giving them maybe a little bit more sense of leadership, a little bit more consistency, maybe a little bit more of kind of that work ethic that we're seeing from Ronell, not necessarily off the field. We know how hard DeZeffin gets after it, but kind of maybe on the field, just again, kind of being a little bit more of the guy that I think the teammates look to. And, in the past, there have been guys at Rapec that have handled that. Now it's DeZeffin's turn. And so I think that's something that I'll be watching for kind of coming this fall and even this offseason, is watching DeZeffin kind of take that next step at being the leader for the Panthers that I think coaches and fans expect him to be.
In our episode with local quarterback trainer Justin Hoover, he gave an in-depth scouting report on Rocco Marriott. We broke down Jack Oots when he committed to Kansas. But those guys, Ryan, showed a lot with Platte County having the season that they did, winning the state title.
Yeah, and again, I think there will be some folks out there that wonder, Jack Oots has probably he does have the bigger offer list, right? Which we don't go by. We're looking at our own eyes and our own gut and talking to folks out there. But when it comes down to Rocco versus Jack, if you want to go that direction, I think, with Rocco, there's an element of athleticism that he doesn't maybe get to show as much of with Platte County.
Yeah.
And he's come so far as a passer that it makes you and I go, if what he did from sophomore to junior year is possible, what does junior to senior year look like? And then again, knowing in the back of your head, there's that athletic ability that we've seen him put on at like Elite 11 combines that doesn't really even get to be seen that much because Platte County is just so good that I think we're banking on there's some upside and even some untapped stuff there with him that we haven't seen that kind of gives him that edge over Jack Oots, who, again, to pitch it back to you, Kevin, we have Oots over Kevin Sullivan, even though Sullivan is the 4-star guy. And even though Sullivan is probably more, we talk about this on the show all the time, more the modern tight end. He's more that receiver. I mean, he'll block, but I mean, he's probably the better receiver of the two right now.
Sure.
Oots is probably the more balanced. He's probably the better football player at this juncture. And that's why we went Oots over Sullivan. But if you want to expand a little bit more on the tight ends, because I know that'll be, again, kind of a hot topic, knowing what Sullivan is right now in the recruiting industry versus where we have him behind Oots.
Yeah, I think Oots has terrific potential as a blocker at the next level. When you look at tight ends, there's kind of three categories of blocker, right? There's glorified wide receiver, or basically wide receiver type. There's the guy in the middle, who can block. It's not necessarily, a huge strength, but it's something that he does. And then you have Oots, who's kind of that type of guy you can build a running game around him winning the edge and him doing different things for you as a blocker. Like you said, he's maybe not as polished as a receiver, can do some good things there. I think when you look across the board at Oots' entire package, he's a little bit more of that old school tight end. Sullivan kind of more of that big H, if you will, or big slot type of guy. Yeah, I'm interested to see how Sullivan continues to go. Obviously, Ryan, he's racked up a lot of FBS and Power 4 offers after the season he had. Has a chance to join a really deep group of former Hawklet tight ends to find at the college level.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I mean, gosh, who is it? Pazuzzi is at, where did he transfer to? Out east. Cassius Howell, Sprague, Bo Sprague. I mean, that list, that list just goes on and on. So yeah, I am very curious to see Kevin Sullivan in action. We saw him against Aquinas this past year. Wasn't the greatest night for Rockers. Nobody really looked good for the Hawklets that night.
Aquinas' defensive line looked terrific. And that's what we'll say about Rockers passing.
That was the crew Hugh and
is that Aquinas' defensive line looked terrific.
But again, they're replacing Charlie Luce. So again, how quickly Kevin Sullivan can kind of get acclimated with whoever the new quarterback is there at Rockhurst. could have kind of a determining factor on the level of statistical success that we see from Sullivan later this fall.
I kind of previewed this real briefly, but a guy I'd like to get a little deeper into because he's such an intriguing player, Ryan, is Aiden Wilhelm. We saw him in person. We watched his tape, and while he plays quarterback for Blue Spring South, what really pops off the screen is just that dynamic athleticism. This kid is absolutely explosive.
Yeah, I mean, you watch the tape here, and I love this part right around midfield when he puts the head down and just says, nobody's catching me. And this is Liberty North. It's got athletes all over the field, and he's running away 10, 15 yards down the field. And you see it over and over again. It's the acceleration. Aiden is a player that I think was very close to reaching 22 miles an hour during a game this last fall. So this is elite speed. And yeah, he can throw the ball. You see it right here. He can launch it down there to guys like Gary Hill. I mean, we've seen him extend the play and then make the big play with his arm, but it's the footwork. It's what he's bringing outside of the pocket as a runner that I think you and I kept coming back to. And we were talking about this the other night when we were putting this top 10 list together of like, to be frank, we were finding every way of like, how can we not put Aiden Wilhelm in the top 10? Because it was like, are we really going to put a guy that we think probably will not play quarterback at the next level unless if he's dedicated to quarterback? It's not that he can't make it, but right now he's probably, if you want to play him at quarterback, you're going to probably have to go to a lower level.
He's got that Army offer, which would be a really interesting sort of fit if he were to stick at quarterback.
That fit, he could probably stick at quarterback because of what Monken runs. If you're wanting him as a quarterback in what you would call the everyday offense, right, then you're looking at, again, probably going to a lower level. But so again, it's like, man, are we really going to put this guy in the top 10? There's like no safety stuff to speak of. We've never seen him on defense, this, that, and the other. And yet you and I kept laughing because it's like, you turn the tape on, it's like, we have to put this guy in the top 10. And not only is he good enough to be in the top 10, the athleticism, like the explosion that you're seeing, the way that he can absorb contact, the balance, all these things, whether it's at safety, whether it's maybe you bulk him up and make him a running back, like slot receiver, I don't know, but he's too good to not be in the top 10.
Treshundon Neal was the next guy in our rankings, and he's somebody that he brings a lot of length and potential as a cover guy.
Yeah, I mean, with him, I mean, obviously there's some weight that obviously is going to be the thing that I think a lot of colleges are probably waiting on. They want to see him in person. How long is he? How fast is he? And again, does he have kind of the body that you feel like you can bulk up? But, I go back to like Echo Boydo on the Kansas side. I mean, he was extremely lean, right? He probably listed himself at 165, and I mean, it was probably 155, 160. He never got huge at K-State, but like at some point, the agility, right, and the ability to cover just wins out. And I think when you think about Treshundon and when we saw him play both sides of the ball, he's just a difference maker on both sides. He's a guy that when he's at wide receiver, the defenses need to know where he is. And then when he's on defense, quarterbacks tend to kind of go the opposite direction from him. Nobody really wants to test him. I do want to see him maybe get a little bit more physical in the run game. But again, as a cover man, it's all there, Kevin.
Mason Wright, moving along, might be the Metro's best combination of, sort of size, athleticism, and really fun tape. I'll be interested to see if he sticks at linebacker or if he continues to grow into an edge guy.
Yeah, again, I think athletically, he's probably even better than what we see on tape. I mean, 6'3", 210, coming over from Park Hill South to Pius. Maybe he's that difference maker that can balance out Pius, right? You've got Hudson Bailey at quarterback. Now you bring in Wright on defense, and he can be kind of the quarterback and captain as a Mike linebacker that can do a little bit of everything. And like you said, I think his pass rush skills caught me by surprise because it was like, you flip on the tape and you expect to see the kind of sound tackler that he is and his ability to take on and shed blocks. But the step, kind of the first step that he has, right, and his ability to bend was intriguing to me, where it's like, well, maybe he's not just a Mike. Like maybe he's more that new era strong side linebacker. And again, a guy that I think is probably going to test a little bit better than people give him credit for. He's the type that we could see kind of creep up this board when it's all said and done.
And while Braylon Agee topped a deep and talented group of receivers, it was really tough for us to separate those guys. He's a district champion hurdler as well as being 6'4". Ryan, let's actually touch on the guy right after him, who closed out our top 10 in Armin Weathers. What did Weathers show you that really had you excited about them?
I'm waving the flag. I'm waving the flag. He's my guy. He's my guy. Watch Weathers here. Okay. And there's some questions about speed, but watch him run away from guys that are on his side of the hash. That to me eliminates any question about the speed, but everything else, this is a kid that's 6'2", 6'3", tracks the ball easily, flips the hips with ease. You see him he'll be able to poke his hand in great length in there, physical at the line of scrimmage. But this is what I love about him is he comes up and he lays the wood in the run game. I mean, he's a guy that wants to deliver the contact at cornerback. I was reaching out to a couple guys just to, again, kind of sniff around on Weathers a little bit more. And that everybody keeps coming back. This is a dude. This kid is a dog at cornerback. He's got that quick mentality of just kind of forget it if there's a pass that, he does allow a completion. I was told he only allowed 2 touchdowns all season at Raytown, and one of them was a miscommunication with his safety. So, this is a guy that everything is there to me on tape. He is the kind of the next thing. We've talked about Dante Manning. There's shades of that with him from Raytown. But also, I think, Larry Porter was a guy that we flipped the tape on at Raytown last year, and it was like, there's something here that's too good to not work out, and it became true. I think this is us kind of hedging that trend again, and then knowing that this is a kid that already has the stature, like I said, 6'2", 6'3", 190, 195, and he's been kind of carving his craft against Larry Porter for the better part of the last year, multi-sport athlete at Raytown. I think that we're just months, maybe weeks away from combines and camps of Armin Weathers going and participating in and absolutely blowing up. And again, I'm taking the word of some guys on the KC Metro Missouri side that I trust. They see it the way you and I see it. I think this is a kid that's got enormous potential.
Ryan, let's roll back the curtain a little bit for those who, maybe aren't familiar with our process. We had a chance to see a lot of these guys in person over the past year. And in preparation for this episode, between us, we probably watched tape on 50 or 60 kids, and it really wasn't easy to narrow things down. There wasn't a big gap between, say, the guys who made our top 10 and guys who wound up maybe 11 through 20 or where we would have had 11 through 20. So I want to ask you, who's somebody that maybe didn't quite make the cut for you that you still have your eyes on and you're watching with a lot of interest?
Okay, well, I know you've got a guy that you want to touch on, maybe 2 guys from the same school, so I'll leave that one for you. I'm going to go back to wide receiver, and I brought up Larry Porter.
Yep.
And again, kind of, you already heard from Clint Brown in our show last week about the frame that he has, that it's that kind of college-ready frame. And there are several guys at wide receiver that you and I really like, but when you talk about the combination of, speed, ball skills, and that frame, right? And the upside that Larry had of he wasn't maybe where he wasn't a finished product last summer, but he became more and more of a finished product as his senior year went on. That to me is Roger Haney at Ruskin High School. Roger Haney, 6'3", 205. I've seen some places list him at 6'10", and he is a pass catching extraordinaire in terms of winning the contested catch. You see jump ball after jump ball after jump ball that this kid wins, and he's got the speed that can create separation. I think there's some things that are still left to be desired from his route running, but I mean, look at that. The ball skills to be able to go up and win balls. It'll be interesting to see. He might not be able to put up the numbers that Larry Porter had in the Ruskin offense, the style that they want to run this year. But this is a kid that he's already kind of giving up basketball, at least this winter, to do more 7-on-7, work against better DBs, work with better quarterbacks, better wide receivers. He's honing in on all the things that you want to see a kid kind of hone in on the offseason. And yet at the same time, already kind of had the baseline stuff to make him kind of freaky. right? And so this is a kid that I'm really, really close to putting in on the top 10. It's one of those situations, Kevin, where maybe we just want to evaluate and maybe hopefully see him in person here soon. I think Roger Haney is on the cusp here of not only our top 10, but another one of these kids that the frame and everything else, he's going to go walk on at these camps or clinics, really show out, and the offers are going to come hot and heavy.
For me, I'm thinking of a duo from Blue Spring South, guys that we saw in person with Gary Hill, who's one of the best wideouts in the Metro, and Blaine Marshall, a really smooth and skilled defensive back prospect. We've talked about Hill on the show. He's got decent size. He's got some juice for that size, and he's a nice route runner. But Ryan, let's focus on Marshall. What really caught your eye when watching him on tape?
Instincts. Yeah, you've got the length, and you're going to see it in this clip right here, which is just phenomenal, just laying out for the pick. And he had a number of picks. He was an all-state DB. But you love the instincts and just his ability to pick up on stuff. You'll watch him come across the field, tracking, staying on that front shoulder, and then timing, jumping in there with that length. But how about this clip right here? Watch him sniff this play out. I mean, this is a kid, again, a junior. This is stuff that I would expect to see from a senior. He sees where this play is going long before, but then times it right to not give it away, to not lose the play. The instincts for me were terrific. And, again, we talked about Armand Weathers. We talked about Treshunda Neal. Those guys might have, say, a little bit more upside in terms of like what they are as a cornerback, or maybe they're a little bit more physical or a little bit more this. But if you want to talk about instincts and maybe the ability to potentially be both a cornerback and a free safety, again, we talked about it, that chess piece. That's where I think this is a kid that, again, could really make big strides again on a loaded Blue Spring South roster.
When we talked about Marshall last night in putting this episode together, one of the things that I kind of said was he looks like a former wide receiver out there in a couple ways. One, he kind of runs routes for the receivers at times, but the other part is you make a mistake, he's catching that football. He does not have the DB hands or inability to catch, and so you got to be really careful around him. Otherwise, it's a turnover. Of course, we also love guys in the trenches. And while no offensive linemen made the top 10, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention a few guys that we considered, like Blue Springs offensive tackle Mason Markle, Liberty offensive lineman Jonathan Percy. Hopefully, we can see those guys go up against an interior monster like a Marcel Reed, or even a sleeper guy that Ryan really likes, like a Platte County edge in Cale Bunce.
Yes.
Potentially at the varsity combine or maybe a local showcase. I know we'd both be really excited to see those matchups.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the linemen, specifically the offensive linemen, because there are 2, 3, maybe even 4, depending on, again, how they fill out and everything, that we felt like were definitely in the conversation.
Sure.
If they're not top 10, they're between 11 and 15, right? You mentioned Piercy, you mentioned Markle. Brashear is a guy at Fort Osage that I'm a big fan of. I know he's not long, but if you just want to talk about the interior road grader and a guy that kind of wins with that wrestling background, the physical tenacity from the lower body, he's a guy that I really like. Again, I think for us, it's more about kind of seeing their agility, seeing their length, seeing them kind of get out and make more plays kind of at that second stage of blocking, and just seeing how their bodies progress from here to August. And all 3 of those guys are worthy contenders, not only for the top 10, Kevin, but more potentially, FCS, FBS level attention.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so excited for combine season because we'll get to see a lot of these guys square off and kind of really hone in on our rankings. So those are our rankings. That's the process behind the rankings. We threw open the curtains so you guys could see anything. Ryan, any final thoughts on the rankings at all?
Well, again, we'll just talk real quick just about, it's early. We were early with Marcel Reed. And again, maybe it's not so much that you miss on guys, but maybe you're just kind of expecting a little bit too soon. And some guys maybe hit that. Some guys will rise. Some guys will fall. But it's nice to put these out now, I think, because it gives, I think, fans an idea of maybe teams and players that they want to kind of keep an eye out for in the offseason, and also gives some of these guys that maybe didn't make the cut, maybe some motivation. We're happy to be that motivation. We're happy to piss some folks off. If it makes for, better football, better one-on-ones here coming up at combine season, we'll take that. But again, it's early. We will continue to monitor these just like the recruiting industry does. But I'll tell you this, Kevin, I'll finish with this. On the Kansas side, if you guys remember our top 10, not a lot of Kansas City, Kansas guys on that list on the Kansas side. A little bit more spread out throughout the state. I think Kansas City, Missouri, on the Missouri side, the Metro is looking to be very good and very deep. I'm very excited to see where this 2026 class goes on the Missouri side.
Yeah, Michael Jordan sort of famously invited the high school coach that didn't pick him for varsity as a sophomore and the guy who got pulled up on varsity ahead of him to his Hall of Fame ceremony. If you reach the Hall of Fame, feel free to ride along and say, those guys on verbal commitment did not believe in me.
Yeah.
Motivated me to get there. We will be more than happy to sing your praises all the way. Ryan, thanks quite a bit. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, comment below, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating, or hit us with your ratings, how you see the City metro area sort of shaking out this year. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.